In this video, we're going to look at some of the impacts that humans have on ecosystems. Humans have always had impacts on ecosystems, but in the past, the population of humans was quite small, so animals still had quite a large area to live in around the humans. Once industrialisation occurred, the impacts on the ecosystems increased exponentially, mainly because the population is increased exponentially. There's about 1 billion more people in the planet now than there was 15 years ago, and this is only going to get increase faster and faster. One of the ways which we affect ecosystems is by land clearing, and that could be for us to build cities to live in, or it could be for us to farm so that we can eat the food. But what we're doing is we're cutting down trees, bulldozing everything, and either putting concrete over top of it or putting crops on it. Both of these result in a loss of habitat for animals and plants. One of the ways that this occurs, or this exacerbates this problem, is when we clear a strip through an ecosystem, for example, to make a road, and it can inadvertently cut off populations from one side to another. So this is something that we need to think about, and we're getting better at how we mitigate the impacts of ecosystems. Land clearing also can lead to an increase in salinity, and the way this works is that when there's a large area of trees or a forest, they have their roots deep into the ground, and this actually gets down into the groundwater. And those roots pull the water up out of the groundwater and put it into the atmosphere through the process of transpiration. Once you cut the trees down, you have an increase in erosion in the area, as well as you don't have those trees to pull the water out of that groundwater supply. And as the groundwater supply builds, so from the rain, it sinks down into that water supply, nothing is bringing it up. So as it builds, it moves up through different strata of ground, and some of these strata have a lot of dissolved salts in them. And as this happens, it brings the dissolved salts up out of the ground. And this increases the salinity, it can cause salt flats, and it's very bad for an ecosystem because most plants don't have a great ability of dealing with salinity. Humans also pollute the environment, and this is another one that we're getting better at trying not to pollute it as much, but something that we still do is air pollution, whether it's in the form of carbon dioxide, which has increased quite a bit over the last 100 years, or more nasty things like carbon monoxide and sulfur dioxide. We also pollute water, whether it's by putting waste chemicals into water or the runoff from the nutrients that we put on our crops. And we pollute the land through rubbish. We have tips, landfill, just throwing rubbish out the window of the car as we drive past. All of these things contribute to land pollution. Eutrophication, and this is kind of what I was talking about before with water pollution, is when fertilizer that we put on crops runs off into the water. Now these fertilizers are made of nitrates and phosphates, which are great for a crop because it means that the crop can grow more and we can eat more. But once these get into the water, they're eaten by things like algae. So we have blooms of algae come up, and these actually choke out other plants by floating on the top of the water and blocking out all the sunlight that gets down to the lower layers for like seaweeds, as well as your plankton and things like that in the water. So this can be quite detrimental to marine and aquatic ecosystems. Another example is introduced species, and when we introduce species, we can do it for many reasons, but what we don't know is the effect that these introduced species are going to have on the indigenous species in the ecosystem. because they will usually be very different to the ones in the ecosystem that it came from. An example of this is cane toads. We introduced cane toads to Australia because we had a problem with cane beetles eating our sugarcane crops. Now, in the country that cane toads come from, the cane toads eat the sugarcane beetles and therefore it doesn't eat the crops. So we thought it'd be a good idea to bring cane toads to Australia. Unfortunately, in Australia, there's more tasty things for cane toads to eat, so they didn't worry about eating the sugarcane beetles, but rather went around eating smaller frogs and all sorts of other things. And this has resulted in a boom in the population of cane toads. There was originally about 100 that were introduced in northern Queensland at the cane fields, and now they're all over Queensland, Northern Territory, all through to Western Australia and down to New South Wales. So they're quite a big problem. Another introduced species is rabbits, which were introduced for hunting. About 20 of them were released, and now we have rabbits all over Australia, which destroy ecosystems. Hunting is another thing that affects an ecosystem, especially the hunting out of the top predators. Results in a shift in power in the ecosystem. And there's a few reasons why we can hunt things. We might hunt them for food because they're tasty. We might hunt them these days for sport. And historically, we also hunted for protection. So, for example, if you were living in a village and there was a wolf pack that lived near the village, you might kill that wolf pack so that nobody in the village gets attacked. So there's different reasons for hunting, but what it has resulted in a shift in power of the ecosystem.